None of you are in this room with me, but I'm still extremely anxious. I can see all your faces staring at me. Cool. Well, before I dive into the presentation, if you didn't get a chance to see my general channel note, I am going to be talking about mental health and mental illness today. So I know that I won't be talking about anything graphic. At one point, I will mention suicide, not personally, just as a resource. But if at any point that's just like too heavy for you, and doesn't feel like something that your heart can take right now, the second I share my screen, no one will notice if you drop off the call. So feel all the freedom in the world to do that, either right now or later. But I'm really excited to share. And if I can ask my Tokyo counterparts, I don't trust Google Translate. And so if there's a concept in English that you see that you don't think is translating well to Japanese, I don't have Japanese in there. I just straight up didn't trust Google Translate at all. But if you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat, just because I want to make sure everyone is tracking with the main concepts and something that is nuanced and hard to talk about even in English. So all that being said, I feel like I gave the chat already. I'm going to go share my screen. And okay. So if I present, do you just see my screen where it says mental health and unhealth?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I've been really looking forward to doing this Moon Speaks ever since I joined the team and Moon Speaks became a thing. I have already had in my mind what I wanted to talk about. So I am really eager to share today. So hello, my name is Milana. I know that a lot of you have seen me before, and at least seen my name in the chat. I haven't gotten a chance to one-on-one talk with every single person here. So hi, I'm Milana. And you probably know me as this. I imagine that if the majority of you were to draw a visual representation of who I am as a person, you'd probably come up with something that looks like this. Am I wrong? Am I right? No? Oh, hello. Okay.
You're right.
You're right.
Excellent. And so as much, one of my only other personality traits is my love for the musical artist Lin-Manuel Miranda. And as much as I wanted to use Moon Speaks to talk about every interview Lin-Manuel Miranda has ever given that indicates we would be best friends, because of aforementioned silliness and who I am as a person, I figured that this actually would be an excellent time to talk about something else. So this is me apologizing to my best friend, Lin-Manuel Miranda. I'm saying, sorry, Lin, he'll get your chance another day. Yeah, I gotta text him after this because we're best friends. So diving in, it's not about Lin-Manuel Miranda, it's about me. I wanted to share that I am one of millions of Americans who battle mental illness. And while this is a true and accurate depiction of who I am as a person, this is not a show that I put on, it's a genuine expression. This is just as frequently my reality. Lying in bed, really having a hard time to get up, even when my toddler is calling my name and wants to play. I have a sensitive temperament, so my joy that I experience being with all of you is very great, but so is my sorrow. And that's a side of me that I want to talk about in hopes to share resources and just share my story. So for the vast majority of my life, I have battled 3 mental illnesses. So they are depression, anxiety, and a little bit of PTSD thrown in for some spice. And I call this the golden triangle of mental illness. So that's not a real term as far as I know of. And with my luck, it probably has some horrible connotation in every single language represented here. But this is me. a significant aspect of me. And it might seem jarring that to talk about these illnesses in a light tone or with this level of candor, but the way I see it is that I do have this golden triangle of mental illness, but that's only one of the many shapes that make me who I am and that make up my personality. So I can't draw anything more than 6 sides. It got too complicated and I erased it. So this is from a book that is just so beautiful, but the metaphor I couldn't like copy and paste and find it, so I couldn't credit the book and I feel really bad about it, but just know this isn't quite an original thought. I want you to imagine a shard of glass in your hand. It could easily cut you, but after years and years of handling it, the edges become smooth. And you find one day it doesn't hurt you at all to pick it up and turn it over in your hand. So my story was once a shard of broken glass. But as the years have gone on, as I've handled the story, as waves have hit the glass over and over again, the sharp edges are gone, and it's now actually quite easy to tell. So while I'm nervous to present and kind of jittery and my palms are sweaty, I'm not nervous about sharing my story in general. So don't feel nervous for me, okay? Secondhand anxiety is the worst. So I want to use my story to share 3 things with everyone here. 1, where mental illness comes from. 2, what mental illness looks like. And 3, how we heal. So first, where mental illness comes from. So according to the CDC, here are some factors that lead to mental illness. Early adverse life experiences, such as trauma or a history of abuse, experiences related to other ongoing chronic medical conditions, such as cancer or diabetes, biological factors such as genes or chemical imbalances in the brain, use of alcohol or recreational drugs, having few friends, and having feelings of loneliness or isolation. Notice that the word is feelings of, not necessarily the act of. It's feeling in your mind that you are lonely and isolated. So in my mind, the best way I can think to explain this is with a simple formula. So genetics plus life experience equals brain chemistry. So if we're applying this formula to my own story, I have the genetics, genes passed down for generations that are prone to mental illness. This random ancestor says, "Hey, do you want these genes?" And I say, "Do I have a choice?" Because no, I didn't have a choice. Plus, loving parents who weren't resourced to deal with my unusually big emotions. As a parent, now I have so much sympathy for the people who raised me because I just had extreme fears, extreme sadnesses, extreme joys, and I can't even imagine that challenge on top of just the challenge that is parenting. So this is my loving depiction of my parents saying, "Oh, what do we do?" And my mom saying, "I don't know, but I love her with all my heart." Because a lot of times it's not a measure of love, it's just a matter of resourcing. Plus, another life experience I had, which is my mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer at a young age. So, spoiler alert, she lives. But when I was 11 years old, my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and told she had 3 years to live. And while the story has a happy ending in the sense that my mom has surpassed that by about 15 years, I spent a few years and months of my life as the oldest child with 3 younger siblings. While my parents traveled around the country looking for a cure and not knowing if I would have a mom anymore. And that dramatically shapes an evolving brain. The brain is usually such an amazing thing. It's, it's elastic and it changes and it learns so rapidly and it generally works for our benefit, but with all of this formula, so, genetics plus life experiences, it tends to lead to what we would call probably less than optimal brain functioning. So on the left, I've imagined optimal brain function being a brain that can tap dance. And on the right, suboptimal brain function, which is a brain that cries for no reason. So I don't know if Mike is on this call. He might be busy with something else, but as the neuroscientist, I really need him to close his eyes at this because this is not a scientific rendering whatsoever. But if I could take a peek into my brain, I imagine that it would look something like this. So this is my brain saying, hey, I could really use some serotonin here. And the neurotransmitters are just saying, no. I also misspelled serotonin. I just like to confess that now. But much more eloquently put in the words of the CDC, when the demands placed on a person exceed their resources and coping abilities, their mental health could be impacted. So it's a matter of scales and resources and just a super nuanced journey into what develops mental illness. And it's something that's still being researched now. So second, I want to talk about what mental illness looks like. So mental illness can be a temporary or a chronic condition. What's true is that according to the National Institute of Mental Health, 1 in 5 Americans live with mental illness ranging from mild to severe symptoms. And 50% of Americans will develop a mental illness at some point in their lives. This means that if you do not experience mental illness, you will certainly love someone who is battling or will battle mental illness in their lifetime. And I'd just like to put a note here. I'm using a lot of resources from the United States and statistics from the United States. I tried to research Japanese statistics, but I couldn't find any, or it was an American take on Japanese mental health, which felt icky to me. So I'm sure there's a lot of resources out there. If there is research, and please, if anyone in the Tokyo studio could share those, that would be wonderful. I just didn't like the feeling of Americans defining another country's mental illness. Thankfully, there is a lot of people who are smarter than I am, who have more fleshed out research. So I'm going to send this presentation out to everyone at the end so that you can see all of my sources and dive into it a little bit more yourself if you're interested. So it's really hard to define mental illness because brains are so different and so beautiful. And there are things that make brains diverse and think differently and operate differently. And that is just such a gorgeous and wonderful thing. And it's really a gray area between what makes a person unique and what is celebrating neurodiversity versus what could be harmful to a person's self or society. So here I have a depiction of diversity being beautiful, but not having the motivation to get out of bed in the morning. Well, I think that we can definitively say that's not as great. According to the Mayo Clinic, these are some common symptoms of mental illness, very broadly: feeling sad or down, confused thinking or reduced ability to concentrate, excessive fears or worries, extreme feelings of guilt, mood changes, withdrawal from friends and activities, significant tiredness, low energy or problems sleeping, detachment from reality, paranoia, hallucinations, inability to cope with daily problems or stress, trouble understanding and relating to situations and people, problems with drug and alcohol use, major changes in eating habits, sex drive changes, and excessive anger, hostility, or violence. There are so many different types and classifications of mental illness, but these are some things that could be representative of something going on in the brain. And in addition to these, there are also physical manifestations. So stomach pain, back pain, headaches, other unexplained aches and pains. I have a silly cartoon saying it's almost as though the brain is part of and affects the whole body. I think there's a stigma in mental illness frequently where it feels like this other thing and it's shameful to get help, but you would never shame somebody who is diabetic from using insulin. So why would you shame somebody for trying to treat a different organ in their brain? That's my personal take. I took a couple of visits early in college to the ER thinking I couldn't breathe anymore. In reality, they were just panic attacks. I didn't have the language for that yet. Also in my life, I've had like extreme stomach aches. And one point in my life when I was extremely anxious, I developed eczema purely from stress and anxiety. So Really trust your physical symptoms that you're experiencing as well. It could indicate something happening in a different part of your body. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about how we heal. As a disclaimer, I am not a professional. I am just speaking from experience and things that I can collect both in my experience and the World Wide Web. But these are some ways of approaching healing that I see moving forward if you or if you know someone else who might be battling mental illness. So, because mental illness is formed due to many different factors, there are multiple approaches to healing that come from different disciplines. So, you have more of an Eastern approach of meditation and going on retreats, and no medication, but meditating and really getting to the core of self. And that can provide amazing benefits. A lot of research is happening in the US right now that dives into brain chemistry and what medically can we do. You know, mental illness is also a social disease. So, what socially can we do to help prevent mental illness? This is all good news because there are different cultures and different peoples and different ways that the brain works. So, it's actually great that there's a lot of different options for someone looking to heal from mental illness. So the first is talk therapy. This is probably the most common, also known as psychotherapy. This, I think, is not a drawing. It's just a live depiction of me in every single therapist's office, where inevitably at some point I pour my entire heart out and assume we're best friends and stalk all of their payments on Venmo, cross a lot of boundaries that don't tell them about. And I imagine my therapist thinking, for the last time, Milana, that's not why you pay me. But I find therapy extremely helpful because, one, it's really healthy to verbalize thoughts that might seem scary or dark or you might see as too heavy to give to a loved one or to say out loud to people who are concerned about you. But a professional who can see the various pathways brains can take can give you tools to help you reel in those thoughts and just be a sounding board and a safe place to voice thoughts. We also have medication. Again, I don't think Mike is on the call. Maybe he's not on the call. I hope he never sees this. But this is a super scientific diagram of what happens when I take my medication. So if the theory of low serotonin is true, I don't keep enough serotonin between my neurotransmitters to stay stable. So the Zoloft comes in and he says, "Hey, neurotransmitters, keep that serotonin in there. Don't reuptake it." And yeah, that's how medication works. It's super scientific and accurate. A note on medication. The way I see it is medication is not the magic cure for mental illness. There is no pill that can take it away because it is such a layered and nuanced illness. The way I like to describe it is that when you are facing mental illness, you go down to a very, very dark place. And mental illness at that stage is almost like a blindfold where you just feel isolated and alone on an island, and you truly believe that there is no help surrounding you because you can't see it. So when medication comes in and it tackles the brain chemistry component, I imagine it's like removing the blindfold so that you can see all of these different avenues to pursue and gain health. It's like if you were drowning, medication is the buoy that would push you afloat so that you could see all around you what you need to do to gain health. And that's been extremely, extremely helpful for my own life. These are crisis responses. These are suicide hotlines in both the United States and Japan. Again, I'll send this off to everybody as soon as the presentation is finished. And just as a note, a lot of times we're afraid to talk about suicide, but evidence consistently shows that one of the best, most preventative ways that you can help a friend that you're nervous is having those thoughts is explicitly asking, "Are you thinking of committing suicide?" That's just an important note that I think everybody should take with them. You're not going to stick the idea in their head. It's actually quite preventative to have someone explicitly say it out loud. Inpatient services are perhaps hospitalization, where you have opportunity for lots of psychointervention, either from medication or from group therapy. Outpatient can be like talk therapy or group settings where you can really work through issues with professionals. These are out of my wheelhouse. There's some amazing research on all of these different brain stimulation therapies. It's just really cool what science can do and how we can kind of hijack the brain into being more quote unquote normal. And then finally, I wanted to touch a little bit on this one, but tending to our bodies and our soul's basic needs. So these individually will rarely cure mental illness, but they can buffer the damaging effects of living in a world where you can both read and see every single tragedy that plagues the human race today. I think one of the great darknesses of the internet is just, everything bad that's out there, and our bodies were not evolved to be able to carry the whole suffering of the world. So these are some preventative mini steps that you can take to hopefully, inhibit or slow down the road to crisis. So getting enough sleep, nourishing your body with a variety of food. Please don't go on a diet. That's a completely different conversation I would love to have as well. But think of nourishing your body. Connecting with loved ones. I know that's extremely hard in COVID. Experiencing nature, getting outside. Studies show that just living by nature can be preventative to anxiety and depression, more so than people who see concrete when they look out the window. Talking about your feelings with others, moving your body, getting those endorphins, asking for help, and taking a break, stepping away from everything. So, in a way, it does cost to support mental health. Taking breaks, working less, prioritizing socialization over productivity. Doing work is meaningful and important. I believe we were all designed with an inherent desire to work, but making room for health means that we are going to take away some room for just work. And I think that's important because 1 in 5 of us need that support now, and 1 in 2 of us are going to need it later. As a result, though, you're going to have better work and, more importantly, healthier people. And to be, human-centered means that we're treating the whole person. And so Ops team has already had some amazing conversations around mental health and feel very loved and supported by Moon. But this is a larger conversation culturally in a world that desires to accomplish so much. How can we still care for ourselves? It's a challenging journey and one that nobody asked for, but there is always hope. Everyone here is on the spectrum of mental unhealth. We're in a pandemic, for crying out loud. There is so much that we can't do that is good for our souls and good for our minds. But while there is always hope and help in a time of crisis, you will have a more vibrant and enjoyable life if you take steps toward mental health before it gets to that point. Years and years ago, I used to not be able to drive a car at night. I had to be driven around, even to and from work, by different chauffeurs, husbands and friends. I'm not that rich or rich at all. That was a weird tangent. But I literally couldn't drive at night because my brain was telling me that anytime a car got behind me, they were trying to murder me. Like extreme levels of paranoia and just like believing unrealities. And yet, through anxiety medication and therapy and a lot of amazing support, I haven't gotten to that extreme since that. Now, if I start going in a dark place, I think, oh, I should, schedule an extra therapy appointment, or, oh, let's call my psychiatrist. Maybe it's time to increase the dosage. It's so much easier. While I've accepted that this is likely a chronic illness I'm going to face the rest of my life, it is so much easier to manage now. It really doesn't inhibit my life in a way that it once did. I know that this is a hard and scary journey, but it's one that evidence says at least half of us are going to face at some point in our lives. And if it's not you, it will certainly be somebody you love. So I hope that you got something out of this presentation. I'm going to send it to you afterwards. And thank you all for listening to my story. Be well.
Thanks so much, Milana.
Thank you, Milana. I loved your drawing.